Gross domestic product is the value of all the goods and services that's produced within a country's borders. So in the US, everything from a cup of coffee to an Amazon order, even your Netflix subscription. Anything you spend a penny on goes towards our national GDP.
What we're seeing is a second quarter GDP hit, which is going to be the biggest that any of us have ever experienced.
But why does it matter how much I'm spending? And how important could it possibly be? So the basic concept of GDP has been around for a really long time, around the mid-17th century. But it didn't become a popular standard indicator of economic development until around the mid-20th century. Today, almost every country tracks their national GDP and follows the idea that GDP growth is a strong indicator for the health of their economy. In general, GDP is calculated by first adding up our national consumption. So everything that you spend money on, from toilet paper to a diamond ring. And then we add in our government spending. And this includes everything from the military to public education to welfare, basically anything the government spends money on. And then we add in our private domestic investments, which is any money a business spends on investments and ventures. And finally, we add in our net exports, which is the total amount of all the goods and services that we exported out to other countries. The US, in terms of GDP, has been the world's largest economy since 1871. At the end of 2019, the US had a GDP of about $21 trillion, and 70% of that was consumer spending. GDP tracks our national spending. So needless to say, if we can't go out to spend money, our GDP is probably taking a hit.
We're going to be looking at a decline in GDP of at least 30%.
In America, the pace of GDP is closely followed by investors, lawmakers, and economists to gauge how much the economy is growing or shrinking. And that's important because these people use the pace of GDP to make decisions that affect all of our lives. However, that GDP data is only released after the quarter has ended, which means it's probably not the first indicator a slowdown is coming, but it's definitely a deciding factor if there's going to be a recession. And this data is tracked in a variety of ways, with inflation, without, even with seasonal adjustments that accounts for the effects of the weather. The Bureau of Economic Analysis has been tracking GDP data since 1929. And since then, this data has always been a reliable indicator of what the economy is doing and what it might do next. But nothing like this pandemic has ever happened in the US before. And with the bulk of our economic growth tied to consumer spending, it's hard to see how or when we'll ever bounce back.
Because it will take time for the economy to reopen. You can shut the economy down very quickly, that switch can go off fast, but to put it back on, there's going to be frictions, and we do think it will take time.
US recessions are officially declared by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and they define it as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy for more than a few months. And many experts think we're already in one. We won't really know the long-term effects until it becomes safe for businesses to reopen. But even then, it'll take time for people to reintroduce themselves into society and overcome the fears of the virus to start spending money like they were before. Where GDP excels as a great indicator for economic growth, it also gets criticized for its failure to take into account the economic well-being of its citizens. But until we have a formula that can calculate and accommodate the average citizen's quality of life, mental health, and income inequality, GDP is still the best and most reliable indicator that experts have and can accommodate for now.